Alrighty guys, welcome back to this next little video where we are going to be taking a look at the E5-1620 on the El Cheapo motherboard, the cheapest X79 motherboard you can buy. Let's get into it. Okay, so let me first and foremost by saying that I had the CPU overclocked to 4 GHz on all cores, all 4 cores, all 8 threads. And with that being said, this CPU, honestly, I would probably compare it most to the i7-2600K, which architecturally and performance-wise actually pretty close to. Unfortunately, I don't have an i7-2600K to test against it, but I will most likely in the future. And honestly, I was genuinely surprised with the CPU's performance. Going through some of the synthetics, for 3D Mark Firestrike, I got a 10,280. Now that 10,280 really did blow me away because this is a 4-core 8-threaded CPU. Now my X5680, running the same graphics card and memory, got a 10,028. Was that 250 some points lower? Which really does kind of surprise me because that CPU has 2 more cores and 4 more threads. And comparing it to the X5687, which is closer in clock speed, but still down on IPC, and it is also a quad-core CPU, just like the 1620. That one only scored a 9,500. So, like, what would that be? 700 points down? A lot. Quite a bit. So the next test that I ran was 3D Mark Skydiver, and this one, pretty much the same story. It got a 22,887 compared to the X5680, which got a 21,130, and the X5687, which got a 19,017. So, all 3 of those scores were within ballpark of each other, but you can really see the IPC improvements and the higher core clock speed, as well as, well, just better single core performance, which 3D Mark really does take advantage of. But now let's jump into some actual gaming benchmarks. Call of Duty Warzone, I got an average FPS of 80. Now this was just jumping into a random multiplayer single or solo Warzone game, and I got 80 average FPS, which was about the same as what I got with my X58 series CPU, because I was GPU limited. The Outer Worlds, same exact story, I was GPU limited, with an average score or an average FPS of 78. Dishonored 2, same as on my X58 series CPU, it was locked at 60 FPS. Now, Darksiders Genesis, which is I believe the new Darksiders that just came out, which is kind of like an action RPG style Darksiders, I got an average FPS of 84. Now I didn't actually test this one on the X58 series CPUs, but I'm guessing it would probably perform about the same. Fallout 4 did actually run slightly better on the E5-1620, simply due to the better single core performance. Now, it wasn't earth-shatteringly better, it wasn't earth-shatteringly different, but it was a little bit better. And there was really only 2 games that I even noticed a difference. And then the next game that really did show the biggest difference is Grim Dawn. Now, Grim Dawn is notoriously poorly optimized. I guess I shouldn't say poorly optimized. It's very CPU intensive and very single-core CPU intensive, simply based upon the fact that this game is built on an older game engine that was designed for older CPUs, and they're trying to push it to its ultimate extreme with the game of Grim Dawn. So, fighting the engine optimizations and the engine performance limitations really does leave Grim Dawn somewhat to be desired in the optimization department. But as I say that, it is not poorly optimized the way that it used to be. It used to be so much worse. But as I say that, Grim Dawn did have the biggest change, where instead of getting drops into the, I think it was drops into like the high 30s, low 40s, I was able to start a game of Crucible and only ever drop to 62 FPS, being that was my lowest drop, with an average of 74, because I have it VSynced to 75, which really did give me a significantly better gaming experience compared to X58. But Grim Dawn was really truly the only exception. Fallout 4 was a slight exception, but not much. And then a game like Destiny 2 was another game that I tested. I honestly couldn't feel the difference between one to the other CPU. It felt the same, where when I would drop with an X58 CPU, I would drop with the X79 base CPU. And the last game that I tested was World War Z, and World War Z gave us really, really good numbers. For World War Z, we had a 4,540 frame score, with a test result of average 76 FPS, GPU load of 95%, borderless windowed, high quality preset, 1440 by 900. You guys can see what's on the Stay drunk, the Friday is on. Alright then. But as you can see from this little picture on screen, you can kind of see like how I was running it, and it ran very, very well. But yet again, we were GPU limited. So what does that tell you? Well, the X5680 can definitely take a better GPU than the R9 290, especially when you start cranking up the resolution and the quality settings. It's the same story with X79. And I'm going to put this out there right now. I am very pleasantly surprised with the performance of this quad-core, where I'm certain that if I were to have a version 2 6-core and overclock that thing to a similar 4 GHz or 3.9 GHz, I would have a very, very, very comfortable gaming experience, the same way that I'd have a very comfortable gaming experience on X58. But there's only one little problem, and that is this motherboard. This motherboard has been so wonky. I literally plugged in a USB flash drive into the back of it and it shut the computer off. I wish I was kidding, and I wish I had a camera rolling on it when I did that, because it literally made me jump. I plugged a USB hard drive into it and it turned itself off. On top of that, this motherboard literally takes forever and a half to boot, where when I hit the power button, I can go and get a cup of coffee and it'll be booted by the time I get back. But comparing it to the high quality 1NZ X58 Deluxe, that one is so much better built. But like I said, this is the cheapest X79 board you can get your hands on. And I think it retails for about $40 coming from China, like 40 or 50 depending on the market. And the CPU only registers, or only would retail for about $20. Meaning that you get really good value for money from both of these parts, but I would not recommend this motherboard. On top of that, the multi-core performance, now this is going back to the CPU, but the multi-core performance really was not there for the E5-1620, comparing it to the X5680. Simply because, well, it's lacking 2 cores and 4 threads. When I was doing stuff like video editing or trying to do a video edit on the CPU to test it out, it felt sluggish and slow, even at 4 GHz, comparing it to my X5680 rig. Which really did surprise me, because I figured that it was going to run better seeing all of these synthetic scores. But when you get into something like video editing, it matters less about the single-core performance. Well, single-core does matter, but it matters less than the multi-core performance when using a professional-grade application or using a very high-grade application. That's the reason that there are server CPUs and there are a lot of workstation CPUs, high core count, low core clock. And that's where it really comes down to. Besides the motherboard being kind of junk, the CPU just kind of lacks cores and threads. For a gaming CPU, it works very well, but for multitasking, recording, video editing, and streaming, I would probably recommend sticking back to X58, or I would recommend picking up an E5 1650, or even better yet, something like an E5 2690. Now, an E5 2690 can be picked up for about $50 or $60 if my memory serves right, and that is an 8-core, 16-threaded Xeon, which is a CPU I'm very much looking forward to testing out. But as I say that, this little quad-core did beat my expectations when it came to general usability. Besides the lack of multi-core performance, it did everything that I wanted it to. I was able to record gameplay with it, even though it had more of an impact than if I was using my X5680. I was able to do some offline test streams. It did work. And I was able to throw in the 64GB kit of RAM, even though sometimes it only registers as a 32GB kit of RAM. Besides the just oddities of this motherboard, the CPU did well, and genuinely makes me look forward to seeing more CPUs in the future. But I'm going to cut this one off here so I can actually get this out to you guys. Thank you very much for watching. Definitely like, comment, subscribe, and definitely know what you guys want to see, because after my whole water cooling fiasco, I don't know if I really do want to dive back into that right away. I have a set of 16GB desktop memory, which I'm going to be using for comparing the E5 1650 version 2 versus the X5680 versus the W3680 overclocked on the Huaneng Deluxe. So I've got some testing stuff where I plan to do that, but I just need to actually have time to do it. But working full-time, and at least this week working overtime, I have been very, very busy, and so I'm going to say this again. I'm sorry if my videos aren't coming out, at least one of them a week, but thank you very much for staying tuned. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you guys later, and definitely like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you guys want to see in the future. I'll see you later. Peace out.